Welcome once again to another episode of This Crap Was on National Television. And Chris, I don't remember who picked this. Was this your fault?
Yeah, you can blame me. This was my pick.
This was way worse than I remember. And we're looking at the pilot of that 80s show, and I could not watch another episode of this.
Yeah, I was surprised it actually had half a season. I think it was like a mid-season replacement. Came out in January of 2002, I think.
Yes, January 2002. And on paper, this is a brilliant idea. That 70s show was a hit. Nostalgia always works, or not always works, but it always gets people talking. And the 80s is that interesting decade that the fashion was loud, everything was bombastic, and
hair was big. Yeah.
Yes, and a lot of people look at that era fondly. However, here's the thing that I found really interesting. So it's the same creators of that 70s show. That show worked because they weren't trying to jam 70s nostalgia down your throat. It was really at its core about 6 people who were friends.
Yeah, it was a show. It was an ensemble show that just happened to be set in the 70s rather than a show about the 70s where they just tried to wedge in storylines.
Right. And you're in I can't remember how the first episode of that 70s show, I should have watched that to see if they did the same thing that they did here. But right away, so let's get right to it. The first scene, we see people dancing. Not very well, and not necessarily in an 80s way, but it says the Berlin Club, San Diego, 1984. And the first 2 people we see are just background characters, but they're caricatures. One guy with a flock of seagulls haircut, and another person sort of dressed like Boy George.
Yeah.
In the Do You Really Want to Hurt Me days.
Yeah.
Already, we're off to a shit start.
Yeah.
Because again, they don't look like they're in the 80s. They look like they're caricatures of what people remember or think that the 80s were. Because when I read about how the creators were sort of thinking, they were looking at, well, here are our lives now sort of like going into the next step. Meanwhile, I think that's not what any of these people were actually doing. I think the writers, in terms of that, they're just thinking of what other people did. I don't know if these people remember that decade at all. They lived through it.
Right.
And when you were watching this, were you sort of thinking about, do you watch The Goldbergs?
I've seen a couple of episodes of the Goldbergs, and again, that's similar to that 70s show where it's like a family sitcom, not a saccharine family sitcom, but it's like the 80s are just the backdrop. It's not about basically what separates the Goldbergs and that 80s show is that 80s show is nothing but a gimmick. It's like, let's just shove 80s or what we think is 80s nostalgia down the audience's throat rather than have like well-developed characters.
Right, and it's just gimmick after gimmick. So our first regular character, Sophia, played by Brittany Daniel, who did a lot. I will always remember her as I forget the character's name. I guess I don't remember her all that well, but from Joe Dirt, the love interest.
Okay, I've never seen Joe Dirt.
Guilty pleasure.
Okay.
Not necessarily a great film, but neither is Night at the Roxbury. I love that one too. And I wrote down doing the Pat Benatar shimmy, from Battlefield, and we're going to get more of that later. So she runs into the main character, Corey Howard, played by Glenn Howerton, who has done very well for himself in Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah, he's a testament to don't give up your dream, because I mean, if he would have quit acting after this, I mean, he never would have been on one of the longest running sitcoms in history. I think it probably is the longest Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Could be. It very well could be.
Yeah, it's been like 20 years because I think it's still on FX, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and it's a good show. And so we learn right away these two used to date, and they're dancing with other people, and we've got more cliches here going on. Because as she's dancing to some random guy. Uh, so he says, "Oh, you're probably some suit. You're a stockbroker." And we don't really know because they met in the bathroom. Ah, see, the '80s also was all about money.
Yeah, Wall
And
Street. Yeah.
oh yeah, even though they're set in San Diego, I don't know what the yuppie population in San Diego was in the '80s. I guess according to this show, it's quite high.
Yeah, I just thought San Diego was such an odd choice. I mean, what
Hmm.
really made that '70s show stand out was it being set in Wisconsin? Is it? I forget if it's
Yeah, yeah,
Madison or
Wisconsin.
yeah. So it was like sort of like just the all-American Midwestern
Mhm.
memory of the '70s. It's like, what is distinctive about San Diego? I mean,
Mhm.
it's south of Los Angeles. That's the only thing I know of it.
Yeah, it's in San Diego, and they try to at least incorporate some non-white characters, though none were Hispanic. Maybe you'd have some in San Diego. What do I know? Nothing apparently. But yeah, we'll get to that other character later. Which,
Yeah.
oh man, well, anyway. Uh, let's see. It's clear at this point that he's still in puppy love with that, and he says, "I hate dancing." So I guess he's trying to be this counterculture rebel in his own way. But they're hitting us over the head. We're supposed to find this out on our own, not just with everything he's doing right away. There's no
Right.
chemistry between this couple. No wonder they broke up. And then what did I write? 90 seconds in, I don't want to hear anything from the '80s for at least a week. I'm pretty much done with that. And random guy asks his buddy if his nose is bleeding, and he's told he's good. Get it? Cocaine.
Yeah.
So we're 2 minutes in, and we're already hit with cliche after cliche after cliche after cliche. One thing I did like, as they're sort of going into the next scene, they're flipping vinyls. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the next day at home, Corey walks into the kitchen, tells his parents that he broke up with Sophia. Although it wasn't his parents, it was his. I thought that it was his dad and sister.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was like. Wow, his dad has a young, hot wife. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, come to find out it's the main character's sister.
Yeah, we never did see the mother. I didn't actually do much. I don't think the mother was ever shown in this entire series.
No, I don't know if she's dead, if it's a divorce and the mom went off like the mom in the next door neighbors, the Tanya Roberts character that
Yeah,
abandoned the family.
yeah. Well, he did say that the dad said, "Well, yes, and I'm going to announce that your mom and I have separated." And they said, "Well,
Okay.
Dad, that was 2 years ago." Yeah, but I like saying it. The dad, played by Jeff Pearson, who's always playing some curmudgeon in some fashion. Uh, he was pretty much in that Married with Children knockoff, Unhappily Ever After.
Okay. The one that had the rabbit voiced by Bobcat Goldthwait.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and that's pretty much, well, he's always sort of played some variation of that, or a dirty cop. But he's always working for a long time, so good on him. This one, he's kind of dressed a bit like Miami Vice, so another cliche, and they
Yeah.
reference that later. But whatever. Uh, the sister, Katie, I can't even remember the actress's name because she didn't do anything else. Tinsley something, or it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. She's making candles. And Katie says, "Well, Sophia was never right for you because, well, Sophia's a lesbian." His response is, "No, she's bisexual." Okay, let's just get into this whole thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we start? it took a long time for TV, or really society for that matter, to figure out what to do with LGBT characters.
Yeah.
And this was an era where I think they were trying to titillate us by having the hot lesbian.
Hmm. Yeah.
The problem here is like when other shows, even before this, did that with Friends, for example, when Ross lost his wife to another woman,
Yeah.
the character at least had depth. They all had
Right.
depth to it. This was just okay. This is an excuse so that we could have two girls kiss.
Yeah.
That's all this was. There's nothing to it. If I'll have to send this to some of my gay friends, see if they were offended by this.
And of course, what you're alluding to is the ex-girlfriend
Yeah,
turns out to have a crush on the main character's sister. And I wondered why they
right.
cast actresses who looked so much alike. I mean, like they're both blonde.
Yeah,
One's taller. The bisexual one is taller. But I mean, they look like they could be sisters. And I don't know if that was like supposed to be some kind of like subliminal thing with the main character, like he chose a girl who looked like his sister, or what
I think you're giving them too
going-
much credit. I don't think they even noticed that's what they did.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, his Corey's response is, well, no, she's a bisexual, like a vegetarian who likes turkey every now and then. Uh-huh. Just anyway. Then the dad says, well, your sister's becoming a booming candle baron and you're making lady golfers. All right, well, fine. Roger shows up. We don't really know anything about him. Played by Eddie Shin. I saw that he didn't really do much. I thought I'd never seen him at all. He did have a season in Agent Carter, one of my favorite Marvel spinoffs.
Okay.
So he has been working, though not much.
Sporadically.
This is my least favorite character, and nothing against this actor. What's he going to do with it? But I got the feeling that they were trying so hard to say, look, here we are in the 80s, and we're not going to have a character like Long Duck Kim and from 16 Candles.
Long Duck Dong from
Long
16
Duck Dong,
Candles.
yeah. I was confusing it with Dave Kim from the Goldbergs. I mixed them together.
Wow, I didn't.
So instead of one stereotype, we're going to give him a completely different one. He's a money-hungry Republican, an Alex P. Keaton knockoff with nothing to really get. That's all you did. You made him a totally different stereotype.
Right. It's like they were trying to take the template of that 70s show. So it's like the Fez character, but instead of giving him an accent, they're like, oh, we'll make him like quintessentially American. But they ended up making him like the quote unquote model minority. So like you said, he's just Alex P. Keaton if Alex P. Keaton was Asian.
Yeah, or completely unlikable. Because Alex P. Keaton was your model Republican, but of just of your traditional Republican values. He was still a good guy, devoted family. He had friends of all different races. I'm sure if they redid that now, you probably have a gay friend too. Probably.
Maybe, yeah.
Or maybe not. I don't know. It can be a gay.
Did you know Family Ties was set in my city, Columbus, Ohio? I
did know that.
Yeah, there was a famous department store called Lazarus. I would like freak out when I would see like Elise Keaton coming in with like a Lazarus bag.
Nice. The only show that I know that's set in Winnipeg was a show called Less Than Kind, and the theme song was "I Hate Winnipeg," an actual song by a Canadian band called the Weaker Thans. Yeah, but I'm actually so far I'm happy to be here. For whatever reason, they never really explain this. Roger and Corey, they're going to work. I don't know what Roger does. I read on Wikipedia, he's a used car salesman. Okay.
So he doesn't have his own car. He has to ride with Corey.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't even think of that. I was too focused on the actual car, where I know things might have been smaller in the 80s cars, but what car is this small that they were going to be sitting that close together? But
yeah, okay. Some of the early like Toyotas and Hondas were that small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but didn't they have their own bucket seats?
Probably.
Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, like I'm nitpicking, but that's what we do. He's listening to self-affirmation tapes. Corey doesn't want to hear that. Then they bring out, at least the music was good. Talking Heads, Once in a Lifetime. They're dancing to it, having a bit of fun. Because at first you're wondering, how are these two buddies? But okay, well, you can have friends with different interests. That's fine. I got no problem with that. I get problems with a lot of other things. So at the record store, crap, what's this actress's name?
Margaret Smith, the owner. You're talking about the owner.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Or are you
Margaret.
talking about the? Are you talking about the girl with the mohawk?
No. Not the owner.
Yeah, Margaret Smith, comedian.
I don't remember her.
Yeah, you know what? I vaguely remember her. She reminds me a lot of Roseanne. Like before Roseanne jumped the shark and became like a right wing um, crank. She has that
Before the
same
ambient.
deadpan. She could be Roseanne's younger sister. I mean, she looks and acts so much like her. But
Yeah. She could.
but I thought the whole record store setting was a ripoff of Pretty in Pink. How Molly Ringwald's character.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just there's another rip from the 80s
Yeah.
setting, and also an excuse to show nostalgia, like vinyl and cassettes. If we didn't know this show was set in the 80s, oh, here we have a physical record store, which I guess still existed in the early 00s. But
I was just in the mall when we got here yesterday, and I was blown away that I actually saw a record store in the mall. Didn't see anyone in it. Oh. Yeah, so when I actually saw a record store in there, but no one's in it. I can't even imagine what they're. Neither was I. I didn't bother to go in. Why would I buy an album now when I can?
was it I mean, were they selling vinyl? Because vinyl's, I don't know about in Canada, but in the US it's made a comeback.
It has too. I didn't go in, so I mean, maybe I will.
Okay.
We got to go back there today, but even then, I mean, yeah, it's if I had space, maybe I'd go get a vinyl collection again. But why? Just
I
so
still have my vinyl collection actually from high school
Oh yeah.
in my garage actually. But
All right. Since we're doing a whole show on nostalgia, I gotta ask. We'll do a segue here. What's your prized piece? Like if you're gonna show somebody that.
Definitely the Sign of the Times, the original issue of Prince's Sign of the Times double album.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think my first vinyl I ever bought was Twisted Sister.
Oh wow. You know, I have their greatest hits on CD actually.
Oh, both of them?
No,
no,
I didn't know there was
songs.
more than one.
I think they only had 2 songs that were hits.
Oh, yeah. We're Not Gonna Take It. And what was the other one? I Want to Rock.
Is
that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it. Well, good on them, I guess.
They tried to bring back glam rock, but so much for that.
Yeah, worked for a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Margaret Smith. I can't believe I don't remember her because she did make it to like all the talk shows, and I was watching a lot of talk shows back to like the late night ones. She had a very good career writing on the Ellen DeGeneres show for 10 years, like from up until 2017. So
interesting.
I wonder if she was a victim or one of the toxic abusers.
Good question.
Yeah, so who's to say? Here's another unofficial prediction. The same thing's going to happen to James Corden. Watch for it.
You think so?
I do. I think there's far too many stories that don't get play where he's just an undercover a-hole.
Wow. And his public image, like Ellen, is just the opposite.
Well, yeah, I have. Well, I mean, when you act that nice, probably you're not. The only exception to that rule, I think, is Tom Hanks.
Okay.
Who's probably as great a guy as everyone says. I totally believe that one.
Who went to college in Cleveland. I always have to tie everything back to Ohio.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Other interesting thing, his wife, who's still with his wife of like 40 years, Rita Wilson, also seems like a wonderful person. And she yeah, I think on her Instagram a couple of years ago. What song was she just hitting out of the park rapping? I don't know, but it was.
Oh God, I can't imagine Frida Wilson rapping.
I got to look it up after. I'll find it. I'll send it, and it was actually pretty damn good.
Wow.
Not that I should be the judge of that, but okay. So all right. So back here at the record store, so we learned right away that Margaret is. I thought she was a burned out hippie. Turns out she was more of a burned out former groupie. Person comes. So someone comes in there, says, "It looks like Madonna," asking for where's the Lionel Richie section. She says it's upper ass and tells the person to get out. Not a great manager or owner of this place.
That's why I drew the Roseanne comparison, the like acerbic, deadpan delivery and the not caring and the.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Corey shows up to work and asks to play Black Flag, and Margaret says, I don't even remember the character's name. We're just gonna call her Margaret. Margaret says
The character's name actually is Margaret.
Oh well, there you go.
Yeah.
I guess it makes it easy to remember your character then. Just like when Woody Harrelson got cast as Woody.
Yeah.
Oh. Let's see if I still have this up here. When I was looking up Margaret Smith, because I didn't know much about her, she won an award for the funniest female stand-up comedian at the 1995 American Comedy Awards. So I don't remember the American Comedy Awards. So I looked up.
I vaguely remember them. Yeah. Well, you were still in Canada at that point, right?
Well, we did have working television. I was, and occasionally I just used the rabbit ears out of the igloo.
I wouldn't think that would. I mean, that show wasn't huge in America, so I just didn't think that'd be a crossover show that would.
Yeah, but we had all the networks.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so because if you lived close to any kind of border, like I did with Buffalo, with ABC, NBC, CBS, I had that all my life.
Oh, okay. See, I'm so American. We don't get crossover. Like if you live in Buffalo, do you get Canadian stations? I wonder.
I have to ask because my partner for another show I do, and there's a blatant plug, Classic Sports Review. My buddy Glenn Pulowski just got back from Antarctica.
Oh wow!
Yeah, doing that for a year. I told him after he sort of comes back from that he should vacation just in Barbados with me. Now that I'm in Winnipeg, he's not going to take me up on that. So anyway, I looked up it was the 1987 awards, because that's when that started, and I was sort of blown away by one category in particular. It was the funniest male performer, or the funniest male performer of the year, won by Robin Williams. Okay, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The people he beat out, again, three of these make sense: Johnny Carson, Steve Martin, George Carlin. I could give you 100 guesses and you will never come up with the other person. So
Jay Leno.
No, you'll never guess it. So I'm just going to tell you.
Okay.
Bronson Pinchot.
And I don't think of him. I think of him as a comedic actor. I don't see him as like doing stand up.
Well, he didn't, but I mean, I guess for this, they just said male performer, so they didn't say.
Oh, okay.
But still, I mean, like, you're putting four legends with Balky.
Yeah.
Okay. That's another part of that 80s. I totally forgot.
That's a show I never saw. I think it was part of that TGIF Friday night ABC lineup at one point, and I never could sit through an entire episode.
Well, because it wasn't funny.
Yeah.
And Balky was annoying, and if that was my cousin, I'd knock him out.
Yeah, I don't know if that show was inspired by his character from Beverly Hills Cop. If he let someone. Okay.
I read, or not read. I saw him do an interview then, because he didn't want to do that character again for Beverly Hills Cop 2. So he said, so he told his agent, okay, I want $1 million, thinking they'd never give it to him, and they did.
Wow.
So, hey, I mean, like, Made a lot more money than I did playing a goofball, so good on him, I suppose. I just forgot how big that character was. That just blew me away. All right. Anyway, so Corey asked to play Black Flag because Margaret says, "Oh, I guess you're in a really bad mood." Black Flag is actually more of when you're angry, not necessarily when you're melancholy about, you know. But
Okay.
anyway, so he again recaps everything. Girlfriend left her for a woman. His music career sucks. And Margaret says at 17, she was living with Jim Morrison. Okay. And he was, yeah, I wrote down, I don't think Jim Morrison was ever that stoned. I don't see that. Tuesday comes in, played by, I never know how to pronounce her name. Kyler Lee.
Okay. Yeah. It looks like Chrysler with the R and S missing.
Yeah, but I never would have known this is the same woman from Grey's Anatomy who played Lexi Gray.
I've never seen Grey's Anatomy.
I don't know, you missed that much either. I'll say the same thing I think I said to everyone. I might have said this to you. Grey's Anatomy, the doctors are never this good looking every time I've been in a hospital. Anyway, they're making fun of each other's hair. Corey and Kyler, because she's got the Liberty spikes going on. And here's the thing with that. The people who dress punk usually went all out. She didn't have the shaved sides or anything like that. So like this was, I don't know if the kids today still use this term. It's very poserish.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, and they kind of alluded to that later. And we learned that she now works there at the record store too. It would be. We go back to the house, and Katie's watching Love is a Battlefield, and she's doing the shimmy. We're 15 minutes in, and we're already regurgitating the same shtick.
Yeah.
Sophia shows up returning cassettes, and this is where we learn that Sophia's got a crush on Katie, and she kisses her. And then the crowd goes, ooh. Okay. Just for that moment, I'm sure that when the writers were thinking, this is it. We're onto something. We're onto something. People are going to keep coming back for it. No, they won't. No, they won't, because nobody bought it. Nobody believes it. Nobody believes in any of these characters, and nobody cares. It's why this doesn't work. I wrote down that this is where they're using sort of like this is like LGBT cosplay, is what I wrote.
Yeah.
Because that's
rather than having it. Yeah, exactly. Like you said, it's like the porn thing of like, oh, two hot girls, rather than someone who's truly exploring their sexuality or sexual orientation.
Right. And sitcoms don't have to be deep, but they don't have to be this shallow either.
Right. Yeah, and I want to say this was probably pre-L Word and pre-Queer as Folk. Post Ellen, because Ellen came out in 97. But
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, when did Queer as Folk start? I don't remember.
I want to say the mid-aughts, like 03, maybe 04.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're probably right. An L Word.
Did you have the British version in Canada?
I knew there was a British version.
Okay.
But so that would have predated that first, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. So again, it's just sort of like what I think a bunch of straight white people in their 20s. I guess that's probably what I would have thought. I probably would have wrote something like that, and I would have been way off at that point in my life. But I'm not a sophisticated Hollywood producer like these people are. Yeah, because this is the same company that gave us actually Roseanne, I believe.
Yeah, and that 70s show.
Right. So I mean, it's not like actually Roseanne, when you think about it, that show actually explored a lot of gay things very well.
Yeah, and I heard a podcast interview with Sandra Bernhard recently, And it's sort of, Sandra Bernhard made it sound like it wasn't like either she or Roseanne set out to like, break sitcom ground. It was sort of like Sandra Bernhard was out as bisexual, she was out and, everyone knew she was bisexual, and sort of like her personality got written into the character because she and Roseanne got along so well at that point. But what I've never heard, this is a little bit off topic, what I've never heard Sandra Bernhard talk about is what is her relationship with Roseanne now? Because Sandra Bernhard is far to the left. And I just can't imagine her remaining friends with Roseanne.
That's a good question. I don't know. But everything has gotten so toxic though in both our countries now that if they're still friends, she can't come out and say it.
Well, I heard Rosie O'Donnell say that she's still friends with Roseanne. I heard Rosie O'Donnell say that when Roseanne posted that thing that got her fired from her most recent version of the sitcom, Rosie O'Donnell called her up and said, take it down. You need to go to a psychiatrist. Something's going on with you. And she said, Roseanne just said, oh, you really think so? Sorry, that was my best Roseanne.
Better impression than I could do.
But yeah, I just have never heard anyone ask Sandra Bernhard. I mean, they ask her all the time, why did you and Madonna stop being friends? But I've never heard anyone say, what do you think about Roseanne being this right-wing nut now?
Yeah, well, I think Rosie just doesn't care at this point. And she just does her own thing. She's got enough money where she just doesn't care. Sandra Bernhard, I don't think has she doesn't have fuck you money.
No, and she's very, the podcast interview I heard, she made it very clear that she has to be a working performer. Okay. She has to take jobs to make ends meet, basically.
Yeah. So I think that's it. Because I think if people want to come out and support their right-wing friends, they can't. Yeah.
Although there's a lot of people who are into that, like, oh, let's, we can't talk to each other. We can't talk to each other anymore. Let's reach out to the other side of the aisle. So I don't know that she would be blackballed for being friends with Roseanne. She just, I don't know, for whatever reason, hasn't addressed it.
Who's to say? I mean, there's a lot of people in Hollywood, though, that are that far, and I'll call them left-wing nuts, where they will refuse to work with anyone who doesn't have their political beliefs. Deborah Messing's one of those. And really, like, okay. I mean, you talk things out. You don't just automatically alienate people. But we're getting off topic, which is a better topic than actually discussing this show.
Yeah, really.
Okay. The two we're back at the record store, and Margaret says, as another joke, doesn't want any tension. She had enough of that when she was sleeping with Creedence, I guess, with Creedence Clearwater Revival. Have you seen what they look like? Other than John Fogerty, I can't imagine why any woman would want to do that, but okay.
It's the musician thing. There's plenty of musicians who have gotten their share of women. I mean, Mick Jagger's not exactly cover boy material.
Yeah, but he's got the moves like Jagger.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm working on Liver Like Richards.
Okay, what? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Liver Like Richards.
Oh, yeah, Keith Richards, who is amazing that he's still alive, but
30 years they've been making jokes about how he's still alive. Who knows? He's good on him, I suppose. They'll outlive them all. Let's see what else we got out here. So he says he's going to stay. Corey says he's going to stay because he's got seniority. She says she's going to stay because basically she's got boobs and she doesn't wear a bra, although she seemed to be. What? Okay, so she's implying that her job is safe because guys want to come in there and ogle the hot girl, although she did everything she could not to make herself attractive.
Right.
I remember the 80s, and I remember people who dressed like punks. They were not considered hot.
No.
It was a counterculture thing that they were trying to do, and they were only attracted to other people into that style of music.
Right.
And they weren't going to come back for her insults. So, Okay. Again, not
And
their fault.
plus,
Sorry, go ahead.
plus the way her character was portrayed, you would think she'd be like a feminist type. And for her to say that is just kind of
That's also
seems,
true.
yeah, out of character.
Well, again, written by people who just didn't have any friends who dressed like that or thought like that, or even listen to that style of music. This is
Right.
just cliche after cliche after cliche. Uh, the dad comes in and then she goes to essentially flirt with him at first. And that devolves really quickly when he makes fun of her hair and she makes fun of him being impotent or something. What was the joke? How does that stay up looking at her hair? She says the same thing, looking at his crotch, and then she makes fun of the way he's dressed. Well, he wasn't dressed that badly. He wasn't coming off completely like Don Johnson. That was that style at the time, and a hell of a lot better than a lot of the things we'd see in the 70s.
Yeah.
So
At least it wasn't fluorescent and striped.
right, maybe in other episodes they did that, but okay. He offers the son a job. We don't really know what he does. He's marketing or something, makes products. I couldn't figure out what it was, and he doesn't really want to take it at that point in time. We learn nothing about any of these people of any substance. I know it's a sitcom and we only have 22 minutes, but I don't like any of these characters, not one of them.
None of them stands out enough to like or really like strongly dislike even.
Oh yeah, so Corey makes a joke about her hair again, and she says, "I'm punk. Deal with it." That's not what anyone would say. Like, what am I watching? What is this?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, did they sort of like watch? I'm gonna go back to all this. Did they watch a gay pride parade and were inspired? We're here. We're queer. Get used to it. I'm punk. Deal with it. Nobody talks like this.
Right, right.
uh, Corey says one thing that was somewhat accurate. Then he says, "Well, you're not punk, you're retro. I was at a Sex Pistols concert when you were listening to the Bay City Rollers in your Barbie jammies." Then she says, "Well," then she goes to a side. "Well, I used to like the Bay City Rollers." Ha ha ha! More canned laugh. I mean, I can't believe. I don't know if this was shot in front of a studio audience. There's no way these people were laughing.
Yeah, it sounds like canned laughter, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, back at the house, Roger, Corey, and Katie are watching Dynasty. That took me back, actually. And they're doing shots every time somebody gets slapped. Roger is such a caricature. What did he say? He gets drunk. Well, they're all drinking because they're doing a lot of shots, and says how much he screams out, "I love Reagan." Thank you, Ronnie. Is that what they thought people did in the 80s? Who were thinking like this? They didn't talk like that.
Right.
Nobody did. Katie shares that Sophia came by and kissed her, and Roger is getting. They might as well have just had him stand up with an erection at this point. Because he's just getting massively turned on by that, and I think that's how a lot of us thought that. I'll admit I wasn't involved. I probably would have had the same reaction at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference when you're 22 and 50. So yeah. Corey's feeling like a loser, so at least they're getting some kind of accuracy here, and that's sort of why he decides he's going to take the soul-crushing job. They go. Let's see. And he go. Yeah, there was just a montage of him at the job as a marketing exec, and he does nothing. Can't figure out anything. So he stinks at this job. I worked for my dad once. All he did was yell at me.
What kind of company was it?
He owned an auto body shop.
Okay.
So I helped prep cars. I was terrible at it. I got so bad sometimes I would hide in the cars. Probably why he yelled at me.
How old were you at the time?
Sort of 15 to 19.
Okay.
Yeah. Man, was I terrible at that. He was right to yell at me. Later on, I would have a bunch of teens working for me and I yelled at them using the same lines. It's funny what you become. Back at the bar, a random guy is calling from a portable brick phone. Okay. Do you know where I'm calling from? I'm calling from a phone. I think people used to do that. They probably did do that. I think a lot of people did that in the plane when they were first able to do that.
Yeah, I remember car phones. I don't remember anyone, and maybe it's because I'm from the Midwest. I don't remember anyone actually having a freestanding cell phone like that. And I remember the same gag in Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, where I forget if it was Mira Sorvino or Lisa Kudrow. There was like, "Oh, I have a phone," and they hold up, like you said, the huge brick.
Yeah.
I thought that was more of a '90s thing, the early version of the cell phone, but
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought maybe this was a little bit later, but again, I couldn't be bothered to check actually when brick phones first came out. I wasn't that interested. Uh, it did make me think though. I mean, like this show being shot in 2002. If they were to hold up the phones that we used to have in 2002, like those old
yeah,
Nokias, I mean, like try and explain that to a kid.
right.
I mean, that
Yeah,
looks just as antiquated.
yeah,
Corey tells Katie and Roger that he hates his job, but Roger again, because he's just all about the money and women. He says the dollar,
mhm.
that sweet money is going to help you get chicks. Sophia comes in. Roger goes up and says, "I go both ways too, and I can understand you." He's trying to hit on her. Like, that's your buddy's ex-girlfriend. What are you doing? Again,
Yeah,
people cannot do
and
this.
not yeah, not to go into too much, I guess, politically correct speak, but I mean, I was recently watching a YouTube video about the trope of the sexless Asian man, how Asian men have always been portrayed as not sexy. And so here you have
Mhm.
another instance of he's not, he's not attracted to at least in this episode, he's not
Mhm.
attracted to the opposite sex. So in trying not to make him a stereotype, they still had stereotypical aspects of
But
Asian tropes in
I,
Hollywood.
I think what they were trying to do is show that they're progressive. See, he's a womanizer. He's, you
Yeah,
know, maybe if we watch other episodes, he would have girlfriend. I don't know because I'm not going to watch another episode of this.
no, no,
But I honestly think that they thought that they were being so 2002 with how we're portraying an Asian person. I honestly think that's what they thought.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was definitely better, a step up from Long Duck Dong for
Yeah,
sure. But he's not. Roger is not a developed character. He's just sort of like the
none of
sidekick.
none of them are.
Yeah,
None of them are. And anyway, so he asks for his job back. So we know that this is San Diego because a guy wearing a similar type hoodie that I'm wearing right now, New Orleans Saints represent, and it said San Diego. So that's how we know we're in San Diego because that's really the only thing we'd learn. I didn't get this joke. So the kid asks, do you have Miles Davis? So the crowd just waits because Margaret's going to have a zinger. You're not ready. So you're not so because he's wearing a hoodie, he's 19 or 20, he can't sort of learn about an experimental jazz legend.
right.
Uh,
I guess the idea is you're not hip enough.
yeah, I know what they're going for, but wouldn't that's the thing I never understood about some music snobs, which I
Hmm.
sometimes become one.
Yeah,
And I've done that. But if you're that way, then why don't you want to actually share your love of that? So like, this is what you should be listening to. If you're someone who wants to buy an album of one of the all-time greats, and you want to discourage that, why?
well, I think it's also her character is supposed to be sort of like you know, a holdover from the 60s, anti-establishment. Like, she's obviously a businesswoman, but she's doing something that's like not in the best interest of her business, you know, sending customers away. But it's like she so has her head in the 60s of anti-establishment that, you know, I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to cater to customers to make money. I'm too cool for that. So I think that's supposed to be the character's conceit, basically.
Well, he's Rehard, goes to take out the trash, and there's Tuesday. She's got her hair down, and they have a more forced dialogue. He implies, or not just imply, he says, your hair's down because pretty much I shamed you into it. No, I didn't. And then they go out for coffee. I wrote worst attempt at sexual tension. I'm assuming that if this show progressed, or maybe it did, maybe those two became a couple. I don't care.
Exactly.
I do not care if they did. And again, they because these two would never be a couple. I mean, if you're meeting somebody like that, your first dialogue is going to be about music. Now, you've got 22 minutes. I get that you're not going to do that, but you're trying to like do a whole story arc in 3 scenes, and it's just not working.
Yeah, they did everything except play Opposites Attract by Paula Abdul with them walking off together.
Yeah, well, MC Scat Cat is, well, yeah, maybe why not? Why not? I mean,
is that what Rita Wilson was doing, MC Scat Cat?
I gotta look it up. I might have thought it was really good just because I just like these two people. Just seem like just phenomenal people, not fake people. Margaret's looking at back, and it looks like prison bars, and just says, "Why do they get to leave?" And that's what I was thinking. Well, I'm about to leave in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And so did every other viewer. Then the outro had the brother and singer singing The Carpenters, and just the dad offers him $50 to stop. I think that's how much it would take for me to watch another episode. This was terrible.
I thought the whole ending with Corey and what's the character's name? Is it Kyler, or the actress's name is Kyler? Anyway, that whole storyline I thought was ripped from Breakfast Club. How the Ali Sheedy character was this goth chick.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you know, Molly Ringwald gives her a makeover and she looks quote unquote normal. Then she and the jock hook up.
That was my least favorite part, because that wouldn't happen.
Right.
None of that stuff would ever happen. I actually read something about that. They had a casting was sort of like during the film. Anthony Michael Hall shot up like 6 inches.
Oh wow.
So, which kind of made I guess they must have shot that dance scene like at the end, because it's like, man, the geek's taller than the rebel.
Yeah.
And probably when shooting started, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, he showed up a couple times in the Goldbergs, and
oh, did he really?
Yeah, teaching the main kid how to be cool, and he showed a picture of him as Farmer Ted from 16 Candles. This is what I used to look like. I mean, that show. I mean, they do everything with a nudge and a wink. That's why they always start off with it was September 12th, 1980 something, because they're going all over the place in terms of the 80s. They're selling you, look, we're being nostalgic, but don't look for accuracy. You know, they
right.
This one just did, like, written by people who I don't know what they were doing in the 80s, but it wasn't anything like this. This might be one of the biggest misses we've ever talked about. I honestly think so. From people who knew better.
Yeah, there's definitely, even now, nostalgia for the 80s, like with Stranger Things. I mean, the 80s was a very, very distinct decade, but I think it's hard to get right. And then second of all, you know, like we were saying, instead of actually coming up with developed characters, they just used the 80s as a gimmick. Even like you said, the scene transitions with somebody flipping through 80s vinyl records, and then the whole scene with them watching Dynasty.
That's it. I mean, from people who again, they knew better. When I say, well, what I always ask you, whose fault is this? So who do you think?
Yeah, I have to say it was from what I read, this was supposed to be a spinoff of that 70s show. So the people who started that 70s show and obviously or helped bring Roseanne to the air, it was their fault. I mean, they had plenty of resources at their disposal.
Mhm.
There was no need for there was no reason why the show should have turned out this bad.
I don't blame any of the actors. They had nothing to work with. I would have liked to have seen. I wanted to see more of what the guy who played Roger, Eddie Shin, I think is his name.
Yeah.
I wish he would have got more shots because he tried. He
Yeah.
tried,
Yeah.
but that was the character I hated the most, and it wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault. I hated the punk girl. I hated her. Tuesday, hated her. These
Yeah.
are not real people. Even Corey, the most relatable person, is not likable.
Right.
There's nothing. There's nothing to hang your hat on in this entire episode.
And the sister was just an airhead. I wonder if she was supposed to be like Mallory from Family Ties, where it's just empty-headed.
They gave her nothing. I mean, she's
Yeah.
making candles. Like, what's her motivation? Nothing.
Right.
I mean, we learned she dropped out of college, but to make candles? Like, so what would she be in her early 20s? She's accomplishing nothing. The Wikipedia says like a Valley Girl type. I didn't see that.
No. Yeah, maybe that's why they chose San Diego, because Valley Girls were so big in the 80s. But wasn't the Valley referring to Los Angeles, the San Fernando Valley? I think so.
Yeah, but I think that was even more of the early 80s though.
Right, because that movie with Nicolas Cage came out in 82, I want to say.
Yeah.
Well, this was 84, so I guess it's only 2 years now.
Well, either way, this was a mess by people who knew better.
Or should have known better.
Should have known better. I don't know why they did what they did. Well, I do. I mean, it was the next progression, and Freaks and Geeks was critically loved. But again, they did it right. You're just looking at it was all about the people. It wasn't who just happened to be in certain situations, and then you think, okay, yeah, I remember a bit of that. It's like we referenced Stranger Things. I think I didn't play D&D, but I know a lot of people did. But
I didn't.
You did or did not?
I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't either, but I knew a lot who did. So they're starting that. I think wasn't that like one of the first scenes, like the 12-year-olds are just playing that. So, but it's not about, hey, look, it's Dungeons and Dragons, like a product placement. Yeah. That's what this was. Everything was product placement. Only there was no product. It was cliche placement.
Right.
All right, let's put. I guess we're just going to put an end to this. We're going to put this out of its misery, which is pretty much what should have been done. Thankfully, this did not ruin careers. It could have.
It didn't really. I mean, I don't know if you could say this launched Glenn Howerton's career, but I guess it got his foot in the door, maybe.
It could. From what I can tell, I think that was one of his first big roles. It was the first major role for all of them, except for I think Brittany Daniel.
Yeah, and Margaret Smith, other than being a stand-up, I don't think she had done like a television, like a sitcom before.
Yeah, she would have been the breakout character. I think if this lasted, I think it would have been possibly the father, because there's something about him that you could do something with. But as for the kids, the main cast of 20-somethings, nothing. There's nothing to work with. Not a thing. All right. So I get to pick the next one. So the one I'm going to pick, if I can find it, is the Harlem Globetrotters.
Oh, wow.
Go to Gilligan's Island. I'm sure I can find it.
Wow.
If not, I'll come up with something equally as terrible.
Oh my God. Wow.
And with that, the show is over. If you haven't watched some of my other stuff, hey, please do. Hope you like me enough to do that. Sometimes I get hate mail. That's okay. We also do how the hell did this go to number one? Chris, you got to be a guest on that sometime.
I'd love to.
Yeah. This week we're going to be looking. Actually, Andrea picked a really good song. We're going to be recording Mac the Knife.
Okay.
Because she's
Classic.
really, yeah, she's really interested how a song pretty much about a gangster killing people is so swingy and poppy and beloved. So we're going to look at that. We shoot that every week. The Classic Sports Review is coming back. I'm really excited about that. Once a week, Evan Nolan and I, we do look at Hall of Fame related news and all that, plus so much more, and just usually me rambling and tripping over my words.
Sounds like fun.
Because anyone can do a show these days. Why not me? Thanks, everyone, and stay safe.